Welcome back to FastGadgets. So I want to talk to you about an interesting phenomena that Firefox has reported that I thought was something we should look into and talk about. Apparently, Firefox collects statistical data about the usage of their browsers. So they find information such as who's using what operating system, how much RAM are they using, which processor are they using, and so on and so forth. And I saw an article come by that said 1 in 10 Firefox users are running Windows XP. And I was a little bit surprised that 10% of the user base out there that's using Firefox. Now, we can't extrapolate that to every computer user and say 10% of all users, but we can at least say that 10% of all the users who are running Firefox are using Windows XP. Now that surprised me a little bit, but then I saw another article that said most Firefox users are still running Windows 7. That one didn't surprise me as much. Windows 7 was a really good OS. It was very stable, and privacy-wise, the intrusiveness was very low. Personally, I think of all the modern Windows operating systems, Windows 8.1 is best. It provided you put in the classic shell so you can get a classic menu. The only reason I'm saying that is it kind of bridged two gaps. One, the operating system was new and it loaded very quickly and it was very resilient. And two, the privacy wasn't yet a very big issue. So Windows 8.1 to me was that sweet spot. Now if you're a gamer or whatever, of course, Windows 10 is probably where you're going to end up. But pretty shocking to know that Windows 7 pretty much has 44.86% of the installed user base that is using Firefox, and Windows 10 came in at 25.67%. Why though? Well, we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you my take on it, and you tell me what you think. So I went right to the horse's mouth, so to speak, and I wanted to look at the report that they had. So we'll go over all the metrics. Kind of interesting. Not a surprise to see that graphics run by Intel was at 63%, AMD 18%, NVIDIA 16%. So the majority of graphics are going to be built-in graphics for ultra portables, smaller systems, possibly some desktop systems, but more than likely, I think the ultra portable market here is indicative of the graphics score. The processor, Intel 86%. I'm sure nobody was surprised by that. AMD 14%. Then we get to the operating system. We've got Windows coming in at 7%. We've got Windows 10 coming in at 26%. Windows XP at an astonishing 10%. And even though it's the newer OS, Windows 8.1 at 8%. And Mac OS is hanging around 7%. And then we have other, which is 4%. So Linux is hanging around in this other section. The big question on everybody's mind is, why are users still using Windows 7 at 45% and Windows XP at 10%? So the lion's share, about 55% of the operating system, is still a older operating system that does not have support any longer. So Windows 7 has some support. I think it's in long term, or it may have expired. Honestly, I don't know anymore. But I know Windows XP has. Unless you have Windows XP embedded, which is for cash register systems, I think that's going to be supported for another year, I believe. So even so, now most people might say, yeah, well, it makes sense. The operating system actually is a really good operating system, and people like it. Now, that's partly valid, but I don't think it really accounts for all the users of these operating systems, right? Windows 10 had the free operating system, so they got quite a few people purchasing the OS, or not purchasing, downloading it for free. And then you have people who bought newer systems that had Windows 10 installed on it. So we know those two reasons are reasons why somebody would go to Windows 10. But what would be their reasoning for staying back on an older OS? And I think it's actually really pretty simple. What I'm thinking is the reason people are not upgrading their systems is because older computer systems are still useful in the sense that you can browse the internet and you can do basic office documents. So they're not inclined to upgrade systems quite as readily. And when they do, they usually go with whatever operating system is installed. So if they're not going to upgrade those older systems, what are they using? Well, keep in mind, this is Firefox users, so this is kind of helpful. I'm thinking the majority here, since we're talking Windows 7, we're talking all desktop operating systems that are using Firefox have went out and actually installed it. Otherwise, how are users using the internet? Well, we know that the majority of internet users are actually using smartphones now. So over 50% of internet use is coming from smartphones. So if you bought a smartphone, say you got an iPhone 7 or a very nice Samsung phone or some other phone, and you spend upwards of $1,000, what is the likelihood that you're also going to upgrade a system that already does the two basic functions that you think you need, which is surfing the web, doing the basics, and possibly, if needed, some basic office tasks like word processing or Excel? So why am I coming up with this theory? Well, my thinking is based on what I'm learning when I teach courses. So for some of the colleges that I teach introductory classes. So introduction to computers, introduction to computer technology, introduction to Office. And they're very, very, very basic classes. So the classes are usually very full. I have many students. And strictly from a subjective standpoint, which is my opinion, what I am seeing is about 70% of the class are computer illiterate. You've heard me right. They are computer illiterate. So if you roll back to the 80s and the 90s, let's go with the mid 80s to the early 90s. It wasn't surprising to know somebody who was computer illiterate, right? Because computers were much more expensive and they were much more rare, at least the desktop models, especially laptops. So it took some time for people to catch up and learn more about computers. And then we fast forward into the early 90s to the mid 90s to the late 90s, and people seem to have a pretty good hold on computer technology and how to use it. When we get into the 2000s, what I am seeing as an instructor of college level courses is that most people's skill sets are with smartphones. So when I say they don't know the skills, and the courses that I teach also have high school students, so it's very interesting to look at the cross-section of students I get. I get high school students, I get older students over the age of 50, I get middle-aged students, I get young adults that are coming in, and these courses that I teach are required for their degrees, so they have to take this basic computer class. And it's really interesting to watch the students because, like I said, about 50 to 60, maybe 70%, depending on the class, have no technical understanding of a computer. Some of them will be visibly bored with the class, and they'll be texting on their phone or whatever. And when they ask me for help and I come over to help them, they don't even understand the basics of how to click the icon on the bottom to get applications to come up. They don't understand where you should double click or where you should right click. They don't understand a context menu. I would say about 20 to 25, maybe 30% can barely use the mouse. And I'm not saying that it's elderly. I'm saying it's the entire cross section, even the high school students, because they've never touched a computer, or if they did, it was very minimal use. Maybe what was required in high school, but their primary access to the internet and access to technology comes from a phone or a game system or something else other than a computer, maybe even a tablet. So that's my thinking as to why people don't upgrade their computers. You're a home user, you have a desktop system and it's running Windows 7 and it's working perfectly fine, why upgrade? I just bought this new iPhone. I just bought this new tablet. I've got an Xbox. I have a PlayStation 4. So that's what I use to play my games. So I have my iPhone to get on the internet. I have a PlayStation 4 or game system to play games. So I don't need this computer unless I'm going to college or I'm trying to learn something or I'm producing a document or I need to browse the internet. But in the case of this computer, most times nobody wants to wait for the computer to come up, which could take as much as a minute to 2 minutes, depending. I don't know if anybody can remember the bad old days when there were no SSDs and you're running Windows 7. It was like pulling teeth. I mean, be honest. It was exhausting. You'd start the computer up and you'd have to wait several minutes. So very troublesome. Some other things that help support that theory that I have there. Chipsets, not too revealing. Let's look at, GPU. We already talked about that. This one was interesting. Display resolution. Over 30% of our users are running in a display resolution that's 1366 by 768. So this is not a state-of-the-art system. Look at this. Only, 17% are using 1920 by 1080. We go down here. What else do we have? Do we even have 4K showing up? We really don't. I don't see a 4K resolution on the list here. Was there one over here? Nope. So I don't know if they can account for the display resolution of 4K or higher resolutions. Mine's 3200 by 1800. But yeah, the resolutions are not showing up. So according to this chart, there is not a 4K or higher resolution than 1920 by 1080. So this would support my theory that users are not really upgrading their technology for the fact that they really don't want the computer for internet access. Besides which, if you're going to go to college, what are you going to do? You're going to use the computer in the college or use the computer in the high school. There's no indicator to suggest that one would buy a computer because they're going to college. Now, they may see the utility in having a ultra portable or a laptop while they're going to college once they get used to whatever curriculum they're working in, but it really does depend on that particular curriculum, in my opinion. So that's my theory. People are not upgrading their computers because not because they love the operating system necessarily, but because they're using other technologies to access the internet. And I am seeing a trend in computer literacy that's actually going down. So it was low in the 80s. It looked like it peaked in the mid-90s, and it looks like it's slowly been going down as access to the internet and applications and technologies are typically tablets or iPhones or some type of smartphone. So that's my take on it. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and share. If you truly enjoyed the video, maybe you'll drop me a like and leave a comment. Always love to hear your comments. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.